I've got a question if you've run out.
Fire away.
And I've just got a bit of a fear that if I don't ask it, my friend will be upset with me.
Oh, right, yeah, no worries.
So this is from my friend who is too ill to come tonight and
Yep.
asking for apologies. So it does make sense to me, but not as much as it does to her. God, having made up to level 22, so after making those levels, why is it that there are all the lower levels and the suffering?
So the
People,
question...
for animals, plants, for the earth.
Yep.
Why did we come into physical incarnation at all on these lower spiritual levels? How come our imperfections and all the suffering, really?
Yeah. So what's the underlying emotion driving the question, do you feel? So let's look at that first. What do you feel it might be?
Some sort of grief.
The grief about suffering, isn't it? The pain of the suffering
Sympathy?
that we're going through all the time. And the question is a very good question. Why am I going through this pain all the time? Why is mankind, why is humanity going through this pain? What's the ultimate cause of my pain? You know, that's a really good question, isn't it? Yeah? All right, so God, firstly I'd just like to clarify a few things. Remember I've said sphere-wise, at the moment there are 1 through to 22, right? At the moment there are 22 different dimensions. Infinite dimensions in the spirit world, 22 of them. Now, God didn't create them. For a start. You know what happened? God created something else. God created the potentiality of them. Everything God created was potential. He didn't create the actual thing. You know what he did? He decided to involve you in the process. So he created the potential of its existence, and he allowed you to create it.
Oh, that's right.
So what actually happened was, at the first time there was no spheres. There was only what we would call nowadays the sixth sphere existed, but there were no other dimensions. But God created a heap of laws and principles that allowed for the creation of those dimensions. And then what he did was he allowed you one thing that is a beautiful gift that he gave you, and one gift that you will actually feel is beautiful at some time in the future, because many of you at the moment feel it's not, and that's the gift of free will. Now, a lot of times we then go down the track of, this gift of free will is a curse, right? If it wasn't for free will, you know, there'd be no one murdering somebody else, would there? And if it wasn't for free will, there'd be no one doing any raping or any of those kind of things either, would there? God would have stopped each person doing whatever. But actually, every one of these choices that we have made because of one decision that we made. And the decision was this. It was the decision of self-reliance. As soon as, and this, by the way, this is the biggest emotion within each of us that we need to eradicate. It's the biggest emotion within each of us that needs to be released. It's the biggest emotion that controls all of your negative experiences, is your desire to be self-reliant rather than God-reliant. Right? Now, the ultimate in self-reliance is the sixth sphere. That's as far as you'll ever be able to progress in self-reliance.
Because you're God, that's as far as you're concerned on the sixth sphere.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm God when I'm in the sixth sphere. I am at the pinnacle of self-reliance.
Yeah.
I'm now God. Right? Now, how many New Age things have you read where they're teaching you that you're God?
Yep.
Just lots and lots of it. That's all the pinnacle of self-reliance. Right? But I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting you're God's child. Right? And I'm God's child. And we become God-reliant. Right? Now, because of self-reliance, Every other human emotion that is negative was created. As soon as I create self-reliance, I start putting myself above other things, including above God. And all of God's laws, I start putting myself above all of them automatically. Now, am I ever above them really? No. So straight away, every time I put myself above them, there's a penalty. And you know what the penalty is? Pain every time to myself and to everyone around me. So all human pain and suffering has been created from that one emotion. And you know that's going to be the hardest emotion for you to release, that emotion.
My mind can't even comprehend what that is.
Hmm?
You know, it's like I'm searching and certainly I'm dyslexic, but I can't, you know, I'm truthful here,
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend what that word is.
What that means.
No.
Yeah.
So is that what they call the separation?
Yeah, all separation is caused by that emotion. Now understand that in your progression you will become more and more of an individual if you're on the divine path. Right? So we're not talking about individualisation here. We're not talking about you remaining an individual, because you will remain an individual. You will not become at one with the universe as you progress. You will actually become more and more of an individual as you progress. But you will not feel separation. You will also not feel self-reliant. You will become completely God-reliant. You will trust God implicitly. Let's look at that particular aspect of reliance. How many of you feel you trust God implicitly in everything you do? Right? It's really hard to do that when you think about it.
Well, we want to.
Sorry?
We want to.
We want to.
Desire.
The desire's there too, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But there will be lots of emotional injuries I need to work through before I will get to that point.
Wouldn't this be an instinctive thing? I'm thinking about sort of cavemen needing to run like hell, you know, not just sort of stand there and say, God save me, you know, there's this brontosaurus or whatever it's called.
Chasing them down.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be a sort of instinctive thing which is then passed on, and we're beyond that sort of physical danger in a lot of cases, passed on?
Why
as
would I have an
instinctive
emotion
thing?
of physical danger? Because I don't believe the truth. That in fact there is no danger if my soul is not attracting.
Yeah, but if you're a caveman, you're not sort of really going to intellectualise this. You're thinking, look, Jesus, you know, sure, pardon me. Yeah, I might, yeah, well, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
So how would you know what the emotion of self-reliance is then? How would you know what
Let's
that
just
is?
go back to this question for a moment though.
Yeah.
The question is really like how do I stop myself from responding instinctively to a situation?
Yeah.
What I'm saying to you is that when the emotions have disappeared in you that cause you to respond instinctively in fear, you will no longer respond in fear. Right? You will instinctively respond in love. And where love is, there is no fear. Now, at the moment, a lot of times we're not instinctively responding with love, are we? We're having to try to respond in love. Right? What I'm talking about is actually instinctively responding because we've released all the emotions within us that are fearful. There's no longer any emotions driving us to respond in fear.
No attractions.
There's no attractions either of fear. We are instinctively responding in love. It's automatic. So you know how all Christian religions today give you a rule book list, right? Don't they? You must not... Do you know them? How many of you remember any... Who was brought up Christian? A few of you? Yeah? Okay. How many of you remember them? Not very well. You must not... Steal is one, we know that, right? You must not commit adultery, that's one. Covet thy neighbour's wife. Okay, yeah. And thy neighbour's goods. Okay.
Honour thy father and mother.
Honour thy father and mother, very good, that's one of them too. All right, now, these are a list of rules, right, that were written down and taught to you. Now, did it make it easier for you to do them?
No.
No, it didn't, did it? What actually happened was, you became conscious of the fact you couldn't do them permanently, and you felt more guilty. Isn't that what happened?
But it was fearful in the Catholic Church because if it happened, you went for absolution.
Exactly. So then they come up with a thing of how to deal with my guilt.
Yeah, so I can do it all week, but as long as I know like
Exactly. So in other words, here's my rule list of what I can't do. Then here's how to handle what I can't do, which is all to do with dealing with my guilt and shame about it all, right? And so what do we grow up with? A whole generation of religious people who are very ashamed of themselves constantly, feeling really bad about themselves constantly, feeling that Jesus' blood covers all that somehow. No idea really how, but it does, right?
There's something more than that too. When we had the list that we couldn't do or we should do, then we had this is what you do to fix that.
Yep.
But if you don't do what you need to do to fix that, then God doesn't love you anymore.
And God will punish it.
and you go into
And eternally punish it. Like,
Exactly.
You go into purgatory and then you buy a leg out and an arm out.
yeah, that's right.
I didn't get that.
So all of these things, all of these teachings, what are they doing? They're just creating fear.
Yeah.
Fear-based.
Now what I talked about in the first century and what I'm talking about now is the same thing, and that is that the new birth or the transformation of the soul is all about one thing, and that is getting rid of the emotions in you that cause you to do those things.